Welcome, everybody. Welcome back, I should say, to the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, where we try to crack the code on growing your business by tackling the challenges that keep revenue leaders up at night. I'm Carl Ortmans, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into a topic that, admittedly, I haven't talked about before or know a huge amount about, and that's community-led growth. Now, today's podcast is sponsored by Virtual Causeway. Virtual Causeway is a B2B go-to-market partner who helps generate more leads, more qualified leads, speeds up your sales cycle, and grows your revenue, all without adding headcount. To learn more about them, visit virtualcauseway.com and mention the show for a special rate. Now, before we jump in, here's why today's conversation matters. Imagine implementing just one strategy from today's conversation and watching your revenue metrics shift within weeks, not months. That's exactly what our goal of this podcast is. Let's talk about the revenue challenges that others have faced and how did they solve it. As I like to say, success leaves clues, and we're going to highlight those clues for you today. Today, I have, I would say, a special guest. My guest today is Dustin Joost.
Howdy.
So Dustin has an impressive revenue leadership career. He's had roles that have covered sales and marketing with companies like Sales Hacker, YourCause, Blackbaud, pre and post acquisition, Trivia, and Asano. Trivia. He's also an investor and an advisor to several companies on top of his focused role today, which is the CRO at Suralink, if I say
Suralink.
Suralink.
Okay.
I can't forget his role with Pavilion as the DFW Dallas Fort Worth chapter co-founder and a lecturer for both the CRO and the forecasting schools. Now, I've had the great honor of learning from Dustin in CRO school, and actually somehow they've allowed me to join him as a guest to host a guest host to present at both the CRO and forecasting schools. He's someone who shares his wisdom regularly. He's answered so many of my crazy questions and continues to help me level up. So I'm honored to have him here with us today. Dustin, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Carl, great to be here, man. Good to be with such a great friend, but also somebody that I equally learn as much from. So this is going to be a fun conversation today.
This is the thing. When people say nice things, I got to put more money in their bank account. So anyways, I appreciate that. So let's get kicked off and share a little bit about your world. What industries, verticals do you work in today? What are your selling motions? What size companies do you work with? Just give the audience a little bit of context if you can.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think I'm constantly trying to answer that question of what do I want to be when I grow up? But what I do know is I love creating memorable experiences that help people solve problems and influence the way that they think about the world. And ultimately, that's where I started my career a long, long time ago in marketing. I was an intern at marketing agencies. And then, somebody planted the whole sales bug in my ear and basically said, hey, look, you understand customer journeys, you understand how to influence people, and your path at a marketing agency is kind of just climbing the ladder. I think you'd have a lot more fun in sales. But I had this stereotypical view of what sales was, the kind of typical door-to-door salesperson who's selling stuff that people don't really need. So I went and challenged that in probably the most stereotypical way by slinging insurance as an intern for Northwestern Mutual Financial Network, right? So it taught me a lot about what I didn't like about sales, but also what I liked about sales, which is at the end of the day, it's much more listening and figuring out if you can solve somebody's problem. And even if the solution that you're trying to sell doesn't solve their problem, you can always help people. And so that gave me a really deep appreciation for fundamentally, what is sales? What is marketing? What is influencing people to buy or just have their problem solved? But that also means I've been really dynamic throughout my career. Like, as you mentioned, kind of started off in marketing, then went over to sales. The vast majority of my experience has been in sales, but I really believe about holistic customer journeys. So I've crossed from traditional enterprise sales to high volume, high velocity SMB and mid-market sales, to a little bit like you, product-led growth, product-led sales. And now I try to bring all of those aspects together to build customer journeys that meet prospects and customers where they are. And so from an industry perspective, I've kind of bounced around quite a bit as well. Started off in recruiting and staffing sales, then went off to corporate social responsibility, which we're going to be talking a lot about today, and employee engagement. That was at YourCause, then nonprofit technology. then expanded into learning and development with Trivi, then went over to data privacy, governance, risk, and compliance, and third-party risk management with Osano. And then finally, here at Suralink, where I'm really building this kind of, or I should say, testing this hypothesis that, the next few years of AI, we're going to see a lot of success in vertical SaaS. So Suralink is the leading client collaboration platform for accounting firms, M&A, private equity, those who are looking to collect documents and collaborate with their clients so that they can be more efficient.
Nice. It's a really cool background that you have, and you've spanned across a lot. And just even listening to you talk, because there's something in my own career of I started in, I worked at LG Electronic. I actually started in beer sales with Molson. So I was in beer sales, and I went to consumer electronics and then to SaaS. Then I took a hiatus and I went into manufacturing and automation and came back to SaaS. So there's something that I don't think we talk. I don't think I haven't heard any. I will say I don't think I've heard somebody talk about it. Is the experience of going into new verticals and what you learn and gain from them and the appreciation. There's definitely something there that maybe that's a future topic, because I know for me as an example, and I'm sure you've got lots of examples where when I went to automation manufacturing, I had to learn a whole new world. Like I learned this thing called Kaizen, and you go to the Gemba and you look for the information and then you make a decision, and there's daily visual management. Like, what is all this stuff? But I find I'm using some of that stuff even in my own day-to-day today to go on track, off track, and make decisions faster and learning about anyway. So sorry, total side but I think it'd be interesting to talk about this topic with others of because there's a lot of emphasis on, do you have the industry experience for us?
Mm-hmm.
Like John McMahon talks about it in his book. If you've ever read The Qualified Sales Leader, he's like,
Yeah.
and Roberge and him have a great podcast on it where they talk about it's actually a mistake. Hire smart people with the right skill sets and they'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. And if you even think about like you and I's friendship, it's rooted in learning from each other. And I think we're just lifelong learners. I even think about my aging parents, right? And what keeps people young, it's their ability to learn and constantly grow their knowledge. And so if I, put that in the context of our careers, I think that need to stay dynamic and constantly challenge yourself. And whether you're doing that because you're moving across different industries throughout your career, you're moving across different stages, or you're just learning about different types of go-to-market motions, or even, your span of control as a leader, I think that ability to constantly be learning is just what keeps you sharp.
Yeah.
We all talk about how our best qualities as leaders is our ability to be self-aware and immediately learn from our own reflection. And I think if you just extend that into somebody's, dynamicism across industries, across motions, across company stages, that innate ability to always learn and grow your knowledge is ultimately what makes you effective as a leader.
Totally agree. And especially now, like there couldn't be a better example today of how fast we have to learn this new thing called AI.
Yeah.
And where does it go and how do you do it? And anyway, so there's a lot of lessons. Anyway, sorry, we're off topic and that's not what we're supposed to, but anyways, my curiosity was there and it sort of is right there.
Well, though, at the end of the day, when we talk about community-led growth, that is also rooted in learning, right? People have a natural hunger to learn. Everybody has different learning styles. I learned that in my time at Trivi. But I think one of the most powerful ways that people learn, and certainly this is true for myself, is by learning from other people. I love reading books, love reading blogs, love listening to podcasts. But the most powerful and effective way I found throughout my entire life is just by learning from conversations, by being curious about other people, their worldview, their perspectives, their perceptions. And so that ability to learn through conversation, I think is a key driver of community-led growth.
I really agree with you because, well, that's how you and I got to meet and became friends, of like learning from each other. A friend of mine, he played in the NHL, and he's spoke to one of my teams, Luciano Borsato, great guy. And anyways, he said to me one time, he goes, Carl, winning's hard. Everybody wants to do it, but it's really hard. And what is it that people want to do? Well, people want to talk to winners. What do winners talk about? Losing. And that stuck with me because it's the truth, right? Like, and that's admittedly how this whole podcast came to be.
Hmm.
Because as much as I can sit down and write content, it's not something that I truly get excited about. But having this kind of conversation, like you said, like I get to listen to you and I get to ask questions, I get to learn, and I take a new perspective away from today. And it was in with Pavilion, listening to one of the and on a CRO roundtable, and listening to people talk about, here's a topic, and all of a sudden you see all these people talk about the topic and different ways that they've approached it, and they come out of it with they're better, they have an idea, and they have a path forward. I'm like, well, where does that conversation happen otherwise?
Yeah.
And so it's in those closed rooms. So that's where this whole thing came to be. And candidly, it's a little bit selfish because I get to learn from really, really smart people, and I get a different perspective and go, oh, I didn't even know about that. How
Right.
did they come up with this one? So anyway, so how did we get to the topic today? I mean, I did look at you and I said, hey, what's a successful revenue initiative you've ever led, or an existing challenge that you're solving or have solved? And we had a really great prep conversation. You said, I think I got to tell you about this community-led growth that we had in 2014. And I got to tell you, it's not one that I really know a lot about, and I'm excited about because it's not something that I've put a big focus on or have learned a lot about. I kind of learned a little bit adjacent to it. But I think if I can maybe start and ask you this question is like, in 2014, you were looking to pick growth drivers. And my assumption, and I could be very wrong, is you made a defined path to say, we're going to pick community-led growth as a growth driver for us this year.
Mm-hmm.
How come you picked that?
What's funny is we didn't even use the words community-led growth because I don't think that was a phrase back then.
Oh,
We didn't really even know that that was a motion or an intentional strategy. But let me relate this to probably something you went through in your career. Like when you were early on as a salesperson, were you a territory seller? Like you had a geographic patch and you're like, all right, I've got to go carry this bag and I've got to go prospect in this region.
that's exactly what it was.
That's community-led growth. At the end of the day, when we were early on, and there's still a lot of sales models that are territory and geographic based, but I think the ZERP error kind of eroded what was the traditional. Hey, you are an AE, you are a hunter, you have this patch, and you need to go build your territory.
Mhm.
What were you really doing? You were building a community, right?
Ah,
You were trying to figure out, how does customer A help me get customer B, who might help me get customer C. And you're trying to find commonalities across all of those customers. And that commonality, that relevancy, was probably something about the geographic region that you served. You
Mhm.
were trying to get customer A so that they could be a reference for customer B because customer B knew something about customer A and maybe wanted to learn something from customer A. So I think community-led growth, as marketers always do, we put a really fancy title and phrase to something we've probably always done, but we also got a lot more intentional about it. So I'm not going to pretend that the community-led growth that we started in 2012 or 2014 was fundamentally different than what we are doing today around community-led growth. But I do admire the fact that today we have a lot more tools around community-led growth. We have a lot more strategy. We have a lot more intentionality. And even executives, CEOs, board members care more about community-led growth because they understand the impacts of it. But we have to go back and realize that it already existed. It was always around. Just the way that we prioritize it, the way that we resource it, fund it, and strategize around it is fundamentally different. But I think I go back to 2012 when we were building YourCause. I joined YourCause really early on, and YourCause was a corporate social responsibility platform. We essentially helped companies engage their employees by connecting the company and their employees with the causes that they care about. And it was across employee giving and volunteerism. So employees could go make credit card donations, payroll deductions. They could go find volunteer events and log those volunteer events for the company. They could also go through matching gift programs, United Way campaigns, disaster relief campaigns. And it was essentially helping to fulfill employee purpose while also connecting the corporation back to the community. And really, when you think about that, it was a bit of a new category. This whole idea of employee engagement existed, but corporate social responsibility wasn't necessarily a practice. You know, in the largest corporations out there, you might find somebody who owned corporate social responsibility, but often this existed in HR. Maybe there was a chief sustainability officer that this rolled up to. So this idea of a dedicated or designated persona didn't really exist. But we knew that at YourCause, our mission was to go make the biggest impact possible. So if we could go and find communities that already had a built-in group of stakeholders, and we could just mobilize them, we could motivate them and give them the tools to go make an impact, we would ultimately fulfill our mission. And we just saw that corporations had a built-in community, their employees. So how could we drive this level of demand? This wasn't necessarily capturing demand. It was going and creating demand. And so our first 5 customers were the customers that then got us our next 5 customers, that then got us the next 10 customers, that then snowballed us into getting the next 20 customers. But we did something really intentional that I don't think makes sense for a lot of companies early on. But it was really Ann McGee who hired me on at YourCause, who told our CEO, hey, we need to hold a customer conference when we had 8 customers. I mean, 8. Yeah, 8 customers. So we had a customer conference down in Austin. Now, these 8 customers were companies like Dell and Medtronic and Best Buy and General Mills. These are the companies that already had, and AT&T, they already had well-respected corporate social responsibility, community impact programs. So, that's something I think our founder and CEO, Matt Combs, did a really good job of identifying, hey, these companies are the ones who are leading this charge, developing this category in their own right, because they want to do this because it's the right thing to do. And so we got them as customers. And then Ann said, let's bring these customers together to just have a conversation, to understand what this industry, what this category could and should look like. So that customer conference was wild, right? We had 9 employees, maybe actually only 7 or 8 employees at the time, had it down in Austin, Texas. We're based here in Dallas, Texas. We all drive down, and I'll never forget the story of, we get down to Austin that morning, and we had all these printed materials for the conference. And we look around and say, wait, where's the box of our stuff? We had forgotten it in Dallas. And that's a 3.5-hour drive from Austin. So one of our account managers had to drive back to Dallas from Austin that morning, and then back to Austin just so we had our materials. I mean, this shows you like typical, scrappy startup that, didn't have everything together, but we made it happen. But that customer conference, I think, was one of the best growth initiatives that we had. We did that customer conference, and it's still going on today, even after Blackbaud acquired YourCause. I couldn't even tell you how many years we've done this, but that idea of customer community really fed the category creation. There's so much more that goes into then how you start seeing jobs being created. We went from very few Fortune 500 companies having somebody that owned corporate social responsibility to then somebody who actually had that in their title. We were able to help people get into those jobs. We created the first industry report for that persona. It's still going strong today under Blackbaud, still chock full of data. Shout out to Cassie Bennett, who was actually part of the marketing team early on at YourCause and still is over at Blackbaud publishing that report year over year. So, that's one example, and a lot more stories that I could go into at YourCause, but that idea and that growth lever of community-led growth has driven throughout my entire career at every company I've been at.
Interesting. And so there was a lot that you just shared, and it's fun to go back to those stories of, hey, we were this, and we wanted it to launch, and we did this thing, and we put, I don't want to say all the eggs in a basket, but if you
Yeah.
had 9 employees, but eight of some of the largest companies inside of the United States or North America, I should say, and you bring everybody together, it's a bit of a gamble. Go, well, hey, there's a story when I was at Vidyard early on when the two founders basically put everything into one conference. They drove a car down and said, hey, we're all in. It's either going to work or it's not. And it worked. And so that conference strategy,
Yeah. Carl, it's funny. I don't think I've ever told you this, but we were one of Vidyard's earliest customers at YourCause. And I
really?
was using Vidyard because I was trying to build this idea of community through our outreach. And I'm like, all right, I need to send some videos to add this personalized touch to it. So
Huh.
we partnered with Vidyard really early on. I think we
Oh,
were on like the most grandfathered pricing model for years.
Oh, well, I would love, actually, now I'm curious. I would like to go back. Who did you work with? Anyways, not
Yeah.
to take us off that path.
Yeah.
But there's a question that I think is in here that I should ask. You moved to this community-led strategy, but you had some really large customers. What was the selling motion and the acquisition strategy before you put all your I don't wanna say before not all your eggs, but before you moved to the community-led strategy? How were you acquiring and how were you selling?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was, again, back in 2012, 2011, 14, 13, what worked for all of us, it was heavy, heavy outbound. And
Mm,
I mean, we're talking about insanely personalized outbound. We didn't have outreach. We didn't have sales loft. They probably weren't even around. We had a Salesforce instance. And I remember writing every individual outbound email myself. And we had the Outlook templates that we would just copy. There was no sequencing, there was no automation. But I actually think that was the kind of foundation of our community led strategy, because writing those emails, I remember thinking, how am I going to be relevant to these people that I'm reaching out to and these companies that I'm reaching out to?
mm,
But again, and this is why I think your first few customers as a company are so critical. Getting AT&T and Dell as our first two customers, putting their names in an outbound email when they were already looked at as kind of the leaders in corporate social responsibility, it made that outbound motion so much more effective. So in a way, like, depending on how you define community-led growth, we started that with our very first customer because we went and got that customer and we treated them very much as design partners. Again, another word or phrase that didn't really exist in 2012 that everybody uses today is like, hey, look, we got AT&T as that design partner. But we leveraged them, and in those outbound emails and in those motions, it was a lot more led with curiosity. It was, hey, we want to have a conversation about your programs and where you're going with corporate social responsibility. And for those companies that didn't have somebody with CSR or community impact in their title, we were reaching out to HR, but we were also multi-threading. We went very top down. I would be reaching out to the CEO of the company because this is something that matters to them, right? We knew that driving corporate social responsibility programs would have a positive impact on employee retention, on community brand perception, and especially during 2012 to really 2020. You had the millennial generation coming into the workforce, and they wanted to work for companies that were much more mission driven. Certainly times have changed a little bit, but we were able to leverage that kind of mission and go top down. But the primary go to market motion was just cold outbound. Not even a lot of
yeah.
cold calling. Like, yeah, we had cold calling, but it was tough to get some of these executive leaders on the phone. So email was our most effective motion. But what was effective about it was the relevancy and the stories we were telling about
Mm.
these other companies and corporations that had some degree of name recognition.
It makes total sense. And it's so funny to go back and think about
Mhm.
pre-outreach, sales loft, those sorts of things, and how, you know, you I remember putting in like a Google Doc or and a Word doc, and we'd create an email. Okay, yeah, that seemed really good. Let's copy and paste that in. But then you have to like do a little bit more research and fill it out. And even like this week, John Barrows taught us at Salesforce the Basho email, right? The why
Oh
you,
yeah.
why now, why us. And I
Yeah.
remember having to write those constantly, and it takes time, and you start to
Yeah.
write. Okay, I got to do the research. I got to do the due diligence. I got to do all these things,
Yeah.
and how that all now you can do it so much faster. But anyways, not to go
Yeah.
with today. Once you've made that decision to say, here's the community, how did you started to how did you at your cause look at community? Were you looking at a company and their employees as a community,
Yep.
or were you looking at corporate responsibility as the entirety of the community? Which of the levers did you really start to lean into?
Yeah. Yeah. So of course, I had no idea what I was doing at that time, right? So I was kind of going off of my gut, and my gut was the more you can be relevant to an individual. We sell to people, we don't sell to companies. I learned that early on in my career. So our focus was less on the company, less on the employee base, and more on the individuals within the company that we believed had this passion for driving a company's corporate social responsibility programs. So, to put this in a more tactical way, one of the best pieces of content that we started doing, and this was probably maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years. Cassie had joined YourCause at this time. And it was reaching out to our current customers and asking them 3 questions. It was a blog that we published, I think, every Tuesday. And it was 3 questions about their career path in
Mm,
corporate social responsibility. So the way I looked at it is if we could figure out who was motivated to build a company's programs and therefore build their own career in this world of community impact, corporate foundations, community, corporate social responsibility, then I could speak more relevance to the person that we would then find as the champion, right? And if I could get that champion, then I knew I could make a connection to the economic buyer. So every week we would be interviewing another corporate social responsibility practitioner within our customer base. We publish this blog, and then every week we would use that blog and our outbound strategy. And like we talk all the time about
mm,
no ask emails. I'm a huge fan of no ask emails, right? There's a good stat that says, you need to deliver 3 to 5 experiences of value before you make an ask. And so this is exactly what we were doing is we were just providing more content, more insight, things that were tactical to people who wanted to build their careers in corporate social responsibility. And because of that, they looked at YourCause as not a technology vendor, but instead a partner who had a genuine and authentic interest in helping to build their programs, to helping to build their careers. And so those first discovery calls, because we kind of rooted our outbound in that, was so much more of a consultative experience. We weren't qualifying. Yeah, of course I should say we were qualifying what the deal could look like in those first calls. But, we'd spend 30 minutes to an hour just nerding out on corporate social responsibility as an industry, what other companies are doing. And so from the very first email, we just had that much more consultative approach.
so it here's how I heard that, and hopefully I'm not too far off, is you decided like how you did this with your cause was, we're going to learn so much about our buyers, about their companies,
Mhm.
about this world of social responsibility and what they're trying to do, so that you become the experts in the field and you're speaking specifically to them and their pain points and the
Mhm.
struggles and their career paths and everything else associated to it, so that when you spoke to them, you weren't selling them, you were almost a peer.
Nailed it. And that has stayed true throughout every company in my career, right? Trivia and learning and development. And how do we empower, chief learning officers and individuals who are leading learning initiatives within their company? Then Osano, it was all about data privacy, and how data privacy is an interesting one because you've got chief
Mm.
privacy officers, you've got marketers who have to manage privacy for the website, you've got governance, risk and compliance, and security and third-party risk management. So you had so many more diverse personas, but what you just said still remained true. You just had to maybe put it in a different lens, a different, use different terminology, have different outcomes around privacy. And then now here at SureLink in accounting and, client collaboration, at the end of the day, it goes back to, we sell to people. So we need to add value to people and genuinely, authentically understand the people that we're trying to help solve problems for.
It's super smart, because and I say that in all. I'm not saying it just in jest. I'm saying it in candid. Like, it is really smart. The more you understand their world, the more language that you can speak to, the more you
Mhm.
understand. They're going to look at you not like, okay, you're not just trying to sell me something. And it's Jay Baer's quote: "The difference between selling and helping is two letters." Like, it's exactly what we're talking about,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, nailed it. And I think that's what like community-led growth has become. It took that and it made it more programmatic.
Mm.
Again, everything, I go back to what I said at the anecdote of like, as sellers, we have naturally done that. Community-led growth as a strategy has just now added so many more growth levers that we can apply to do just that.
Yeah. So what was the evolution of community-led growth for you and the team? You
Yeah,
started with 8 customers or so. You held this conference, you brought people together, you had this great blog, you asked lots of questions, you became so known to them.
yeah.
What was the evolution of the community? Was it, and maybe I'm asking you too many questions at once, but I'll sort of like give a bit of a preface and see what you think. Did you take the community-led growth as like, we're going to set up this instance, I'll say it for lack of a better term, where people can go, the like minds, and they can ask questions, almost like a pavilion or
Yeah,
something. They can go there.
right.
Was it, we're going to create this community of people where we brought them like almost like an advisory board together to talk about the world, these great companies?
Yeah,
Or was it more of, here's our focus of creating these communities within your territories and establish really, really strong connections so that we know when we go into a territory, here are the things we do. It comes back. This is how the demand gen aspect happened.
yeah.
Am I even close to any of those three, or was it something completely different?
No, it was really a combination of all three of those and more. But I laugh about the whole like, did you have a portal where people, could go online and collaborate and ask questions? Because that was a big request from our customers early
Huh.
on. And I remember like our executive team, we were debating on like, okay, we should do this, but what does that really look like? And remember, this is pre Slack. This is pre a lot of these tools. Yes, there were forums out there, and the industry also already had a forum, right? Like, don't get me
Hmm.
wrong, we weren't the first to build any sense of community and corporate social responsibility. There were already a lot of great organizations out there that were not vendors, right? We were just more of one of the first vendors to do it. But I remember we tested a private LinkedIn group early on, and that did
Oh,
not work
no.
whatsoever. No, and I remember I was the one who created that LinkedIn group after one of our conferences and hearing a lot about it, and then trying to moderate that, and people just weren't all that interested in it. And when I looked at why, they just felt like it was actually too connected to their own personal brand on LinkedIn. And they,
Oh.
I think this is again back in probably 2015, 2016 at the time. And it's funny how fast those things change, because now you fast forward and like LinkedIn groups never really took off all
Hmm.
that well. But then when you separated it from somebody's personal brand and you brought it into the world of Slack, like, yeah, it's a lot more effective. So it's funny how times change. But that evolution was actually less about kind of this forum and online community to, we invested heavily into the in-person experiences, just because that's where relationships were really formed, right? Now, this is also pre-COVID. I think COVID certainly changed the way that we think about relationships. But pre-COVID, I think folks prioritize that in-person experiences. Fortunately, I think that is coming back quite a bit. But we've now realized the effectiveness, like you and I have. We've never met each other in person, but we're
Not
great
yet.
friends virtually. Yeah, not yet, exactly. So one of the best things we did, and Jason Limkin has this best quote of, "You never lose a customer that you see in person." And we took that to heart very early on, partially because that's how our CEO started the company. He's just one of those people who like genuinely believes in relationships. And so as we were building each of these customers, and again, back then we were doing a lot of RFPs, and RFPs required an in-person presentation. So we were going on site and doing these long presentations. But Odessa Jenkins, who is our VP of customer success, she is a powerhouse. If you're not familiar with her, go find her on LinkedIn. She's now the co-founder and CEO of the Women's National Professional Football League. Incredible human being, and also believes deeply in relationships. And she said, "Hey, we're going to go on the road. And for the first quarter of every year, we're going to do a top 25. And we're going to go see every top 25 customer in person." What's funny is right after the first top 25, we had all these customers saying, "Hey, you just went and saw PwC. They're in our neck of the woods. Why didn't you stop by us?" And we're like, "Yeah, we should do that." Within 2 years, top 25 became a top 100. And so in addition to a customer conference, Matt, Odessa, and I were on the road for the first 2 quarters of every year, visiting every customer in person. It was an hour-long conversation individually with those customers, and we just asked 3 questions. What matters most to you this year? How can YourCause better support you? And then what is going to ensure that you renew with us? And those 3 questions led to some incredible whiteboard conversations. It led to product ideas. It led to ideas on how we continue to push this industry forward. But then it quickly morphed into, okay, we saw 5, 6, 7 customers over the last 2 to 3 days in the city. They all want to hang out together. So now we've got to do a big event or a big happy hour or something. So we turned what was that big annual customer conference, and that continued to happen, into a lot more of these one-to-one, one-to-few, and then the customer conference was the one-to-many. And so we had all of these various touch points. I think what's interesting is during my time at YourCause, we actually never had a geographic territory structure. It was much more about named accounts. Now, that was intentional just based on how we wanted to prioritize AE skill sets, personalities, and what they did best with the more account-based marketing approach that we wanted to take. With that said, it was also a little bit of, I was early enough in my career to not really understand how to structure a geographic territory at that time. So since then, I've certainly played around with that, and I think there's a good world of both. But we made up for the lack of a geographic territory structure with more of these kind of regionalized events.
And especially the size of companies you're talking about.
Yeah.
The AT&T. Yeah, I know AT&T is heavily based in Texas, but they've got lots of other locations around North America, or I
Yeah.
guess I should say the United States.
Yeah.
And so that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and sometimes naivete is a good thing. Oh, I didn't think about that, but you know what? This thing over here really worked.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I like what you're talking about is how'd you say, you don't lose a customer you see in person. One of the things that was instilled in me early on was get on a plane and walk the halls.
Hmm.
And if you walk the halls, you'll see a different world.
Yeah.
And so that became something that I believed in, and even working with BlackBerry at the time, there was times where I was on the road for 6 straight weeks, and I'd come back and my manager would go, "Hey, it's great that you're on the road and you're learning, but remember to come back." And it
Yeah.
was sort of this one president gave me this analogy of you can leave the house and enter. His analogy was you can leave the house and enter the jungle to learn, but you got to come back. If you get stuck in the jungle for too long, you become a different view, or you might get lost.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, interesting. And so why I'm kind of connecting these, because it seems like you went into the world, you went into your customer base, you sat down, you understood, you had that FaceTime, you heard the stories, the problem statements, and then I'm guessing you came back and said, "Hey, did you know that Pam at AT&T is talking about these things, and Sherry over at PwC is talking about this, and John at Best Buy is talking about this. We got to prepare for these things in the future." Like, did you get a forward vision of by doing all these in-person events?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, we've kind of formalized the idea of customer advisory boards and design partners.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is just applying curiosity and using your customers to understand where your industry is going and then partnering with them to get them there. So yeah, I mean, I can't say it's anything like revolutionary, but it's just being more intentional
Yeah.
about the things that we naturally want to do as entrepreneurs, as company builders, which anybody in sales is certainly an entrepreneur in their own right. They are builders. Yeah, I think the part that I loved about what you said with walking the halls is like cutting my teeth in IT staffing and recruiting. That was the goal, was for you to get the key card. If you could get the key card, because in IT staffing and recruiting, you're not selling to a company. You're trying to go get a hiring manager, get their recs, then find another hiring manager, then ultimately get on the the approved vendor list with procurement. So you're just constantly building. And I remember learning that in at Insight Global, of like, if you can just get the key card, then you have entrenched yourself in that account. You've entrenched yourself in that company and the people who exist there, and you're going to be successful.
I totally agree. That key card, or there was one point where somebody said, "Hey, Carl, that's your desk over there." Because I was there as often, and I was like, "Really?" They're like, "Yeah, when you come, you sit there." And it was amazing, and they were super gracious. But I also had the belief of, the more that I understand about them, the more that I could help them. And I like what you said, and that's that if I can help you solve some problems, awesome. We're going to do great things together. But I also can tell you that if we go and they say, "Hey, I want to do all these things," I'll look at you and be like, "I can't help.
Yeah.
Don't use me here, because it's not going to go well. Your success is important." So I
Yeah.
think that relationship is key.
Yeah. I think that relationship is also what is almost coming back into the world of revenue and go to market. If I think about it, during the ZERP era and during what we call the SaaS golden age, right? The
Yeah.
digital transformation, everybody was buying SaaS because they needed to go through this digital transformation of SaaS. Things became a lot more transactional. Why? Because there was so much more demand to capture. We
Mm,
didn't have to create as much demand. But the nature of sales is actually creating demand. It's not about just identifying explicit pain, but instead implicating pain. It's educating them on things that might be relevant to them that they maybe didn't know. It's shedding the light on the problem that they didn't know that they had and emphasizing that. And I think we just have to be honest that 2014, 2016 to then 2021, 2022, we didn't have to do as much of that because there was so much more demand to capture.
mm.
Now things have gone back to the way they were, right? So we have to go and create that demand as marketers, as salespeople, as product leaders, as company builders.
Yeah. History repeats itself. We see it all we see it constantly, right? It repeats itself. And now, I you know, I want to say it was like the second or third podcast. It was early on, but I remember having a topic that I started, and it was the conversation was like, "So is what old is new again? Like, are we going back to in person? Are we sending the handwritten notes? Are we doing these things? Because everything now is." I mean, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's some SDR teams, BDR teams that are doing like 400-500 calls in a day on top of some of these other things. And I go back to the day, like you were talking about. If my early days at Vidyard, if I did 150 activities in a day, that's phone, email, etc., I would be done by the end of the day. Like, I had nothing left. I gave you everything I had because all of those were hand typed, or they were phone. Like, I was actually dialing a number. It was a lot more work than it is today. And I don't mean to diminish the profession at all, but it's
No.
the technologies now are able to make us faster and smarter
Mm-hmm.
than we were. And that smarter aspect, I think, is the thing that we've just got to learn more about, in my opinion. Is we have more information readily available. We have to lean in and try to connect the dots. Or as Anthony Anarino was talking about, is, find the one thing that they don't see. Like, what is the thing that's underneath the surface that they don't see? I want to bring them a piece of value. And
Mm-hmm.
so, anyways, the old is new. So maybe I'll ask this, my last question before we wrap up, because I just realized we're 40 minutes and it went really fast. When you started to lean into community-led growth and when you started to do this, what was the response from the team? Did all of a sudden you see conversion rates go up? Did you see your revenue metrics shift? Did you have to hire a lot more people? What was the impact of this focus?
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think what's interesting about the time at YourCause is it wasn't even necessarily a shift for us. This was our foundation. So
Mm,
yes, there was, there was the time before we like really started truly leaning into it at YourCause, but we were constantly building on this. And so it was the key to our company's success because it was how we believed that sales, marketing, product, customer success, account management, all of this should be done.
mm,
It was so inherent to who we are that it's hard to kind of think about, well, what was the strategy before versus what was the strategy after? And I think that's where, if we look at community led growth today, you have to make it a fundamental part of who you are as a go to market organization, of who you are as a company, and then start layering on strategies and tools to accelerate it. But
mm,
instead, don't think of the tools and the strategy as a way to start it. But instead, you have to have a philosophy, a mindset. Like at SureLink, one of our company values is we are customer obsessed.
mm,
End of the day, that is a core tenet of community-led growth. So the tools that we do, the webinars, the strategies, the conferences, those are just ways to bring that philosophy to life.
mm,
But if you start with a mindset around that, then you end up hiring people who believe in that. You end up organically putting strategies in place because everybody just thinks that way. There's a
mm,
fantastic book called The Outward Mindset by the Arbinger Institute. And it's all about how processes and methodologies will only go so far to change behaviors. But instead, if you can build a set of mindsets similar to like company values or mission statements that empower everybody to think with those mindsets at the center. And ideally, it's mindsets about how do we treat each other and work with each other, and then how do we treat our customers and work with our customers. You have empowered people to move faster, to make decisions in a common language. And I think that is the genesis of community-led growth. Is
mm,
it's not just a tool set, it's not a marketing strategy. It is where you start to then build tactics and levers on top of it.
mm. Maybe one more question on this one, because I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. The people that you were selling to, the corporate responsibility, that seemed like it was an upward it was an upward path for them. So by you leaning into, hey, I'm going to bring you together, I'm going to create this community. Did that actually enhance your selling process versus being more virtual? Like, was that almost intentional
Oh
by
yeah.
you at your cause?
Absolutely. I mean, it was, it's kind of like we always talk about in sales is you want to be the vendor, the product that helps somebody get promoted. And that's
Mm,
exactly the way we were thinking is, okay, we either have somebody who does this full time, they're already in the role, but we want to elevate the effectiveness of their programs. We want to show the ROI of their initiatives. Or we have somebody who wants to build this in their company. How can we empower them and help them get into a position where they can formalize what these are and actually create that role for them? And it 100% enhance the effectiveness for us.
that's great. You just lean in. You understand your customers so well that
Yeah.
it helps. So, anyways, okay. As we wrap up here, sorry. The Yes, I still have a home phone, and you can probably hear it
Is
in the
that the bat
background.
line?
That is the
Check in?
home phone, and as much as I don't like it, it actually talks to us, and it's only ever. What do you think? It's only ever
Yep,
the spam calls that come through, and
of course.
but anyways, awesome. So one thing that if we move to wrap up, I like to say everybody likes new, nobody likes different, and doing both at the same time can cause friction or uncertainty. For those companies that have thought about their own community and their own community-led growth after this conversation, they get into their office on Monday, they go, "Hey, I listened to Dustin. He told me all these great things." What are two or three actionable things that you would tell them starting Monday, hey, look for these things or do these things to launch your community-led initiative or enhance your community-led initiative?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be basic because I feel like everybody either understands this and has done it or wants to do it, but you've got to go talk to customers. Just talk to customers, right? And we hear this all the time. If you talk to customers, not about how your product can help them, but how your company can help them by bringing them together, by enhancing their career, then you're getting the insight on, well, what would a community look like here? What do the professionals that we serve, what do they want to do? How do they learn? How can I bring them together? Because a customer event may not work for every company. But instead, a webinar series where they're getting CPE credits might be the right path. It could just be these customers want to learn in a more one-to-one capacity. So how do I build a bit of a mentor connection type model for the folks that we serve? The other part is do an assessment on how you think your organization is leaning into the idea of we sell to people, we don't sell to companies, and we are here to add value to the individuals. Look at your go-to-market motions, your outbound emails, your campaigns that are driving awareness, those that are converting awareness into interest, those that are then converting interest into intent, and finally decision. At every level of that customer journey, there should be some motion, some lever that you're adding value to the individual that you are selling to and not just being transactional. That's going to look different at every company because when we talk about transactional, I believe that even in a high volume, high velocity environment, community-led growth has its place. And I saw that at Osano when we were selling more SMB, especially to marketers who are solving the privacy problem, at Trivy, and then certainly here at ShareLink, where we serve both enterprise firms and SMB firms. So, do that assessment to understand, do we have the right levers and more so the right mindset and philosophies of community-led growth at every touch point in the funnel?
Awesome. It's super well said, and I think the intentionality and working on the foundation and talking to customers.
Yeah.
If you talk to customers, it's amazing what'll happen. And guess what? If you don't talk to customers, it's amazing what's going to happen. You
Yeah.
might even see them walk out the door. So,
Yeah.
awesome. This has been really great.
That's fun.
Before we leave, if somebody says, "Hey, Dustin, I loved it. I want to learn a little bit more. I want to follow you." Where would you tell people? Where would we tell people to connect with you or follow you?
Yeah, add me on LinkedIn. So Carl just threw up my LinkedIn URL as we were talking about before the podcast. You can also go to Dustin Joost, Joost. It's Joost like toast. Been using that since kindergarten.com, and that'll take you to my LinkedIn as well.
You've got every angle covered. It's awesome. Thank you, Dustin. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate the friendship. I appreciate you being able to do this. That's going to wrap up another episode of the Revenue Problem Solvers. Obviously, Dustin, thank you for sharing hugely invaluable insights today. Some of these strategies you can put into action right on Monday morning. Remember, success leaves clues, and every revenue problem has a solution. Sometimes you just need the right conversation to find it. Until next time, it's Carl with Revenue Problem Solvers, helping you turn obstacles into opportunities. Thanks for investing your time with us today, and see you on the next episode.
Thank you.